Alberto, Regis?
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to say that I agree with what you just said. I mean, in fact, we have detected this is one of the results that we have actually incorporated in this outlook is the fact that the countries that have more difficulties as a result of trade liberalization have had to reduce their revenue, their trade tax revenue, the taxes collected from the exports of oil and mineral resources, have actually they stick out as in a much worse fiscal shape. I mean, they are characterized normally by poorer taxation systems. Nevertheless, and answering a little bit the question that I think I understood from Professor Liabal's, we have detected some trends also on progress on some countries that have actually modernized their tax administrations. It is not uncommon now in Africa to find electronic filing systems for companies, single administration offices with which to deal on taxation issues. Okay, these are things that are becoming increasingly common. Some of the champions in this area are Morocco, Ghana. I mean, these are countries that have managed to widen their tax base considerably and increase tax revenue. And then I also wanted to react to the what I think I understood from the representative of CEBRI. I mean, I actually wanted to thank you because you have expressed some concerns on the impact on social dimensions of these investments, right? And you expressed CEBRI's concern, and you told us that CEBRI is actually doing something about it, right? You're transferring some sort of capacity to the local institutions, and you have just answered one question that I've been trying to find out answers for since I arrived to Brazil last Friday. Actually, I've been meeting with several institutions, several companies, and trying to gather information on Brazil and Africa and investment, okay? And they all claim there's some differential aspect of the Brazilian way of investing abroad. There's something distinctive, but we haven't actually been able to formalize it very well into what is it that is different from Brazil. And it's examples like the one you're actually referring to that I find particularly interesting.
I may just comment on 3 points. The first one is social cohesion, and I would refer to that more from the global angle. What is observed very often in many developing countries, and particularly, again, I insist on LDCs, which are that many in Africa, is that investment tend to focus on mineral resources areas, on coastal areas, and on cities. Of course, there are exceptions, but this may tend to widen the gap. I'm not that familiar with Africa, but to take the example of India. In India, something like 80% of foreign direct investments are basically invested in 5 states. So basically, you have a growing gap between those regions which attract very much foreign direct investments and other areas which are backward, which remain backward, and of course the skilled people tend to move more to those regions receiving FDI. So basically this is a threat. You may have observed in the past weeks that Thailand, which has a very nice growth, which very nicely recovered from the crisis, well, there were major riots in Bangkok. And basically, for 2 months, basically, the center of the city was not accessible. So here, there is a real problem of social cohesion. And when I was discussing with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry colleagues there, they were telling me, well, we have managed to address our issues of education, our issues regarding health, but we are really not, regarding growth also, but we have really not managed to address the issue of social cohesion. So I think that we can ask ourselves to which extent FDI really are instruments to reduce the social cohesion, to reduce social inequalities and strengthen social cohesion. Second point on local content. When local content is one among so many issues that developing countries will think about when attracting foreign direct investment. And if you analyze bilateral investment treaties, you will observe that very often the interest, of course, of the investor are very much taken into account, but the interest of the recipient countries are not that much taken into account, not only in local context. You can refer, for example, as interesting examples, but unfortunately, again, I cannot mention an example in Africa, but in Malaysia. Malaysia has negotiated quite a number of very interesting bilateral investment treaties where local content is very much taken into account, where geographical dimension is very much taken into account. If you invest, for example, in eastern Malaysia, you will get quite some benefits that you will not get if you invest in Western Malaysia. You will also have to employ a certain number of minorities and so on and so forth. Yesterday we were in a meeting in which it was said that, and I was very surprised, that Brazil has no bilateral investment treaties, and that they were very often using the Netherlands. Well, I just took this information, I must say, that was new to me. Now, if you analyze the bilateral investment treaties that Netherlands may have with African countries, while I wouldn't say that the interests of developing countries are, in a, I would say, sustainable development perspective very much taken into account, or sufficiently taken into account. Last point, it would be very interesting to analyze to which extent, when a transnational is investing in a given region, to which extent there is a kind of critical mass of small and medium enterprises which can adjust themselves to be in the added value chain of those transnational, even if they provide very low added value type of goods. Now, on the fiscal side, well, I would be maybe a little bit less optimistic than some colleagues maybe. Yes, of course, there are very nice examples like Morocco. Yes, there have been innovation in many countries, but still, again, in quite a number of countries, when you have bad governance, you can hardly have good fiscal policies. So if I take 3 or 4 issues which I do observe are far from being addressed in many countries, this is the broadening of the tax base, this is the simplification of the tax structure, this is the elimination of quite a number of privileges and loopholes, and this is the decentralization issue, to mention 4 only, but there are more. So those issues, okay, processes have started, but it's still a long way to go. And if we think in terms of capacity strengthening, yes, of course, capacity strengthening is taking place, but very often, or too often, at the central level, and not in provinces, in decentralized areas. And last comment on fiscal affairs, it's very nice to have a good taxation system. It's very nice to implement it, then you get revenues, but what is the use you make of revenues? So here there is all the issue of fiscal legitimacy. And this has been quite a lot studied by some colleagues of ours in Latin America, and just observing, for example, in Latin America, that a lot of money is spent on education. I'm not referring to Brazil, it's more general. A lot of money is being spent on education with sometimes quite low efficiency. So there is the fiscal legitimacy issue, and there is the efficiency of expenditure and the coherence of those expenditure with the development strategies of the countries. And here again, I'm not that optimistic.